Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Von Manor, where Roger and I have returned to talk about Dracula. Today we're going to talk about Dracula. And the reason I'm talking about Dracula is because of Grammaticus over on his channel. It's all Grammaticus's fault, as most things are. Roger and I, we were watching BookTube the other day, and Grammaticus had a video all about the book that he reads every single year. There's this book he reads every year, which seems excessive, but he does read it every year. Which book is it? I'm not going to give it away. You have to go watch Grammaticus's video, which hopefully I'll remember to put to link down below. Hopefully I'll remember. I'm sort of forgetful sometimes, but maybe it'll be there. Anyway, it's on Grammaticus's channel. And he was talking about why he reads this one book every single year. And it got me to thinking, because there are a lot of things that I reread. I like to reread books. Not every year. I usually let a few years pass, usually. But there are a lot of things that I reread. Robert E. Howard, for example, my favorite writer of all time. Of course, I'm going to reread that. The Great Gatsby, a book I like a lot. I've reread that a few times. Frankenstein, of course. It's one of my favorite books of all time, Frankenstein. There are a lot of books that I have reread. H.P. Lovecraft, probably the most, other than Dracula. Dracula is probably the book that I've reread the most. I mentioned in a video the other day that this is actually the first book I ever read, the first adult novel that I ever read in this edition. You would think that this edition would be enough, but no, because come to think of it, I'm a little bit obsessed with Dracula. I'm not sure why, but I am a little bit. Not only do I have this copy, but I also have this hardcover copy from Penguin. This is the Penguin hardcover edition with, I think that's Wolfbane. I think. Let me know if somebody out there knows. So let me know I think that's Wolfbane. Maybe. I don't know. Tell me. But this is my Penguin edition. Just this Penguin hardcover. But I also have this Barnes & Noble hardcover edition of Dracula. This is from Barnes & Noble. This one's nice because it matches my dumb shirt. See, it matches the dumb shirt I'm wearing. But what's also cool about this particular one is that it does have, it's Dracula and other horror classics. So you have the other horror classics. You have The Jewel of 7 Stars, The Lair of the White Worm, and best of all, Dracula's Guest and Other Stories. So you've got some other stuff in here. So, I have an excuse for it there. But I also have this fancy pants edition of Dracula, which is usually on the shelf there. But I took it off for this video. I have this fancy pants edition of Dracula from the Easton Press. And there's the guy responsible himself, Bram Stoker. So this is one of the 100 greatest books ever written. How about that? Dracula is one of the 100 greatest books according to the Easton Press. Of course, the Easton Press's 100 greatest books, there's actually more than 100 of those. They're not very good at math over at the Easton Press, but they make some nice books. So I have this nice fancy pants edition, which has some nice old-timey illustrations. And I like the way it's set up with the diary entries, the dates on the side and the chapters at the top. It's all kind of nice. This is a nice one. But my favorite Dracula that I have is this one. This is the new annotated Dracula, annotated by Leslie Klinger. This one is fantastic. This one's great. I have some other editions of Dracula, which I just didn't grab because they're not here in the library, but this one's really nice. And it's got a ton of notes, a ton. Lots of notes in this volume about every single aspect of this book. Leslie Klinger just, every single technical detail or odd word or, train schedule or whatever. He's got extensive notes about it. And that makes this cool. That's one of the things that makes it cool. So I'm obsessed with Dracula. Obviously, I have all these copies of Dracula, and even though I haven't read it every year, this is a book that I return to quite often, very often, more often than any other book I've ever read. Why? What is it about Dracula? Because I'm not the only one. There have been some other people on BookTube who have mentioned that they have read Dracula several times. And there are some viewers of this dopey channel who have mentioned that they've read this book several times. So what is it about this book that makes a few of us, or many of us, keep coming back to it? Particularly since we know everything that's, you read a book a few times, you know everything that happens in the book. So why? Why would you keep going back? Some of the things seem obvious. It's the atmosphere. It's the feeling that you get when you read this book. It's familiar and yet somehow still creepy despite that. And I think there's more going on with Dracula. This is a book with a lot going on in it. And I think that's one of the reasons that I like this version of it so much, Leslie Klinger's version, because he really goes into all of that. Part of it also is the way the story is told. Dracula, of course, is a fantastic character who's been in so many movies that, I don't even know how many movies Dracula's been in, but it's been a lot. Many of them have been terrible, but there's been some good Dracula movies, although, mysteriously, I've never seen a movie that really captures the whole story of Dracula, and it is filmable. It's not like some weird thing that you just couldn't film. You could actually make a very accurate version of this novel on film, but even the films that have been called Bram Stoker's Dracula have not really been Bram Stoker's Dracula. So that's an oddity. That seems strange to me. For some reason, which I can't figure out, filmmakers have not been able to translate the story and also the chills and the horror of Dracula. So I'm not sure why that is, but it's true. This book is its own thing. And the way it's told in diary entries, in letters, and various documents also gives it something extra. There's always something to ponder and reflect on in the different parts of this book, whether it's the diaries or the letters or whatever, because some of these narrators, they could be a little bit unreliable, which this edition, Leslie Klinger's edition of the New Annotated Dracula, really goes into quite a bit. Every weird theory, fan theory, up to the point where this book was put together is probably in here. And it's fascinating. It's a fascinating book if you're really interested in Dracula, which obviously I am. Dracula as a character is just such a great villain. He's not quite the Dracula you see in the films, the suave Bela Lugosi, and the even suaver other Draculas that you might have seen, Christopher Lee and all those guys. The Dracula in this book is much, much creepier. He is a legitimate monster. And there really isn't anything truly romantic about this Dracula, I wouldn't think. There's something compelling about him, certainly, but he's just creepy. He's creepy at the start of the book, and even when he gets younger as he drinks blood, he continues to be creepy. And you meet Dracula in the beginning of this book, and you get to know Dracula in the beginning of this book when Jonathan Harker is basically taken prisoner by Dracula before Dracula goes to England to terrorize our other characters. And at that point, once you leave Castle Dracula in the beginning of the book, you don't see too much of Dracula. He becomes kind of a shadowy figure. But we already know Dracula from the beginning, so we know exactly how creepy and dangerous he is. And while the other characters are trying to figure out what's going on, you know, as Lucy starts becoming pale and dying as the victim of the vampire, the other characters are trying to figure this out. We know exactly what's going on. We know that, you know, she's a victim of Dracula. And Dracula does reappear in a few different parts in this book. Suitably frightening. And then he will vanish again into the shadows, and then we're stuck with Van Helsing, you know, who can be a little tough to take, even for those of us who really, really love Dracula. And there's just something about this story. And I can't quite put my finger on exactly what it is about Dracula where I could pick it up pretty much any time and read it, whether it's this version or just a bare bones copy of Dracula, which I guess really is this one. This one doesn't even have an introduction. And I could just read Dracula, and I find it tremendously compelling. Most books, when you reread them, one of the things that gives them that added interest is that even though the books themselves don't change, you do. You read them at different parts of your life, you're going to be a different person reading the book. So you're going to experience the book differently. Dracula, I've read so often that kind of negates some of that. I know this story so well because I've read it so many times throughout my life that at this point, if I pick it up, I know exactly pretty much word for word what's going to happen in this book. And yet, I still derive great pleasure from reading it. It's one of those books. It is the book, I think, for that, for me. It's a book I could read over and over and over again, and doubtless I will for as long as I am around. I am not immortal like Dracula, even though someone keeps promising to help me out in that regard. It hasn't happened yet. But, you know, one day, if I am immortal, you know, I'll just keep reading Dracula throughout the centuries and probably enjoy it just as much as I do now. Anyway, I'll shut up. I've just been babbling on, you know. Okay, guys, I will catch you next time.